Oh, hello, world. Whistling. Nice. What is up? Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Matt Forte. We are here live at the Build studio in New York City. Insatiable's second season is streaming now on Netflix, picking up right where we left off in season 1 and moving at a breakneck pace. You are not ready for where the show takes you in season 2. Joining me now in just a few short moments to talk all about it, the great Debby Ryan is back on the show, folks. How about that? That's exciting. They're excited. I'm excited, too. We're going to bring her out in just a moment. But first, I believe we have a trailer for the show, so let's go ahead. Let's run that clip.
I'm Patty Bladell, and I'm not your typical pageant queen. There are things about me that I wish that I could change, but I can't.
She's sort of the most amazing girl I've ever met.
Yeah, sounds horrible. You're a beauty queen with a hot boyfriend.
It doesn't matter what I look like. My life is a total mess.
I am a murder suspect, okay? What?
Yeah.
Did you do it?
No! Of course I didn't. Nothing can change who I am or what I've done.
Don't let the past drag you down. We're leaving all the drama behind.
Did she just steal my car?
She's been through a lot.
I decided to take control of my life. I couldn't think about death or destruction. I had to focus on my future. And then who knows what I could do. Come and feel that.
Oh, God!
You can get away with a lot when you're hot.
Oh, that just never really does get old. I know Patty. She's a lot of things, but she's not a killer.
Oh, girl. Get excited.
That was fucking awesome.
Ladies and gentlemen, make a ridiculous amount of noise. Debby Ryan's right here. Oh, my goodness. Congratulations. I was just talking to you about the craziness that we'll try not to spoil today as we talk about season 2. But very, very cool. So excited to have you back on the show. I saw just recently you were in the Philippines or something. That was wild. Was that your first time there? Or
it was my first time there, yeah. Apparently, the Philippines, the only thing they love more than satire is beauty pageants. And so our show was a hit there. Yeah, truly, they really got it, and they resonated with them. And so we got to kind of come and bring one of our songs. There's a song that we have called Dead Girl, and we premiered it there with them. And they had this like fabulous drag performance. We had a fan pageant. We get to kind of hang out with them, and it was so awesome. Yeah.
That's so crazy. How long were you there for?
I think I was there for 4 or 5 days.
Okay.
They were kind of jam-packed. We got to wander. Actually, our cameraman, our first like cinematographer, he lives there now. Oh, cool. And so I got to like meet up with him and hang out, and Dallas was there, and it kind of was a good like business pleasure.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds like right on the cusp of just enough, but not enough time. Like you got to see some stuff, but obviously now you got to go back. Kind of thing.
Exactly. It really went my whistle. I now have like left with a list of what I want to return for. I mean, it's pretty special. It's a pretty amazing culture.
So cool. So how long ago did you guys wrap up season 2? You've been finished for a minute,
Yeah,
right?
it must have been end of June.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think. Yeah, because I spent the 4th of July with Arden Marine, who plays Regina in the show, and that was
later,
a couple
I
weeks
think,
after. Yeah, she's the best.
She's
yeah,
so
you can have
good.
fun with her.
Oh my gosh, so exciting. Okay, we'll talk to you about this because I know from last time you guys were here how much everyone put into this show and how much it means to you and how much love was poured into it. So where were you when you found out you were going to get season 2 and you got to come back and play in this sandbox?
Yeah, I was in London.
Yeah.
I was on a trip there that wasn't work related. It was kind of a personal trip, and I get to go, and there's a time difference, so it's like 1 a.m, and it's the night before my fiance was playing like his big first show back after this album launch, and so it's middle of the night. We're kind of on a weird tour schedule, and Lauren Gussis, our showrunner, texts me and says, "Hey, can I call you? It's about the show." And I was like, well, yeah, I was like, this is either great or it's not. Yeah. And she called, and I found out, and I just was so excited. I mean, truly, the end of season 1 just even as a viewer, you're like, how are they going to deal with this? Like, what are they going to do now? And so to know as the actor that I got to really step into that and navigate that, and I could not have imagined what I was in for season 2. So it was a delight.
We were just talking a little bit about that during the trailer of like where this season lands and where this show ends up. Like, never in a million years did I know what I was watching until we got there, you know? And we'll talk a little bit about that. But one of the things that's great about a second season on a show is, you know, everybody knows each other. There's a little bit more comfort, a little more familiarity. You've been here before. You can kind of push things a little bit more now. What was your feeling walking into season 2? Where was your confidence level? How are you feeling coming back to Patty?
Yeah, well, you know, when we created the pilot, we were trying to figure out the tone and figure out what it was. The pilot was originally for the CW, which obviously has a very different tone. And totally different, yeah. When you, in my experience, in my watching the CW, there's nothing like this on it. So kind of trying to navigate and reconcile like what we were doing and knowing what it was with trying to make it fit was strange. We found it when we had a home at Netflix and we shot the first season. And then I think further knowing each other and to your point, like how we all fit in together, how our characters play against each other and in the spaces, the fun that can be had in navigating in all of those directions. It informs a lot, but more than anything, I would say on the hiatus, on the break in between season 1 and 2, watching the show with the editing, with the music, with the color correcting, and really seeing how it just translates and how it pops and how kind of camp it is. That was so inspiring and was like a nice kind of wind to ride into season 2. Yeah. More assured. I
don't know what the show would be had it stayed at the CW, because and the CW is great. They do a lot of great shows. I watch a lot of their stuff as well. But there are, when you're on network television, there's certain restrictions, there's certain rules you got to play by. Whereas on Netflix and on streaming, they afford you a freedom to kind of explore these different avenues. And it's just like, I don't know that we would have landed here if you weren't there.
No, we wouldn't have. And I feel really, really lucky. Like when they passed, we all were like, but we thought that there was something really special here. Like how did we miss that? And it was the best thing that ever happened, because while they were all so lovely and so supportive, and even internally they were like, we're gonna miss you, we love you guys. When we found our home at Netflix, it was perfectly right, and we had this room to kind of create a tone and find this hybrid. And Lauren, our showrunner, had worked on Dexter before, and so I loved Dexter and was like such a geek where I was like, okay, so how did that mindset make you hungry to create this, right? And she was just talking about the idea of if Dexter's code wasn't so clean, if Dexter, you know, there is this sort of Frankenstein story, there is this twisted sense of justice, and this also, like, she deals a lot with her past, and she deals a lot with, am I a good person? And how the only way to really find freedom is authenticity. That authenticity might lead her to become the most sincere version of herself, which we discover might not be a good thing. Yeah. And I think being able to take that all of the places that we have, Netflix is the perfect fit and has been such a great home.
I feel like, too, we got to see more of Patty kind of deal with that this season than we did in the first season. And some of that comes from, I guess, the comfort level. Some of that comes from where the home is. How far ahead do you get to see? Like, how many scripts do you get out? So how much did you know you were going to get to tackle?
Right. We kind of had a conversation about the tone. I went and sat with the writers, and we had a conversation about just the overall shape of it, and Patty in general. But, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do in 2 weeks, right? I don't know how the decision today that I make is going to affect me. So there was a certain amount of only knowing what you needed to know. So I would say probably 3 days before we would read it or begin shooting it was when we would find out what happened in it for the first time. So as in season 2, people start to kind of disappear, and some of these beauty queens, there is a killer on the loose. And I could understand, if you've watched the first season, why you would suspect Patty, but she does realize she's a killer, not a murderer. It's a different thing. So in this navigating, I was like, am I doing it? Like, you would tell me, right? Because I do need to know. Like, yeah. Like, it's actually very important that I know. Don't tell me who did it if it's not me, but I would need to know that to play it. So yeah, we knew it just as much as we needed to know, and we kind of went on the ride as well, which was, you know, quite a delight. And of course, we read other people's scenes, but we're not really there and present for it. So in the watch of season 2 was really where it came alive, and the magic happened to me, and I was just like fully watching the whole thing. I couldn't stop.
Well, that's another thing too. More so than season 1, I think the Patty and Bob dynamic, like you split up a little bit more than you did in the first season. So it's more of an ensemble thing. You get to see more of the cast and play around a little bit more, which must have been exciting to kind of get to do that.
Yeah, I think that everyone is such a rock star, and usually there's like a couple great people and a couple people who are like, not my person. And in this show, I'm truly like deeply obsessed with everyone in a different way. And we all just are cool and family, and it's just fun to be on this ride together. So to be able to go and explore that and have scenes with people who I've just kind of watched, or it was very fun to, initially when I read the script, we optioned the life rights of Bill Alverson, who is a real lawyer by day, pageant coach by night, and I thought that it would be really tracking with Bob's story. And then realizing that it's actually a Frankenstein story, and he's just kind of creating this monster, and that I get to be the monster. That was like quite fun, and then to see how that bounces off of different contexts, and of course the background of pageantry, as well as, when she steps into herself and she starts to discover that some of her rage and her anger and her binge eating is rooted in her insecurities and her emptiness. That, to me, is when we get to really work with fire, and we get to talk about the real humanity behind it. And it's still so camp and so soapy and fun, and it's this caper, and there's these murder mysteries, and we're racing, is Magnolia, like, what happened to her that night? Did she remember? And all of these things, and as they're coming together and she's getting closer and closer to being found out for what happened with Christian at the end of the first season, the pressure is on. Truly, by the end of, I would say by episode 8 or 9, I have gotten like stress hives. When I was younger, I would just get hives and just like they would itch. And I was like scratching myself with the anxiety of constantly being like, they're all about to find out. They're all about to find out. And playing that for 15 hours a day, your body doesn't know the difference, right? Your body doesn't know you're acting. So I'm just like scratching myself, like bleeding. Like I was so stressed and anxious for like the last month of shooting it, because it really, everything's closing in around her.
Is that a difficult thing to kind of reconcile? Like, you love what you do, but what you do, it requires you to stress the hell out for a really long period of time and go to this like dark and negative place. Like, at the end of the day, how do you come back to, I do enjoy this?
Well, because there are times where it's not a great day, or something's going wrong in my life, and my character just had a major win, or is falling in love, or is experiencing wonder for the first time, or is proud of herself, or has a victory, or has created justice, and I get to also create those feelings. Yeah, and I think that is the magic, right? It's the hiding in plain sight. It's like Debbie is always there, and then Patty is falling in love or having her heart broken, and then at the end of the day, you can kind of take off the sash and put on your sweatpants and, scroll.
There was something you had mentioned a little while ago. We were just talking about like when the CW had passed and how everybody first interpreted that as, oh, but I thought, this was something special. It felt like a loss at the time. I'm just like, you've been in the business for a minute. How many times have you found yourself in that scenario where you were facing what you thought was a loss, but, now in hindsight, oh my God, that's the best thing that ever happened?
There's a bunch of micro kind of versions of that, which is that I really wanted a movie and I came so close and I lost it to this girl that I always lose it to or whatever. And then the movie comes out and it's not great, or it kind of has toxic messaging or whatever. And you're like, all right, well, that was actually a win. Like, that was actually protective of me. Or if I had been doing that, then I wouldn't have been able to go on this trip where I, had this amazing thing happen. And I try not to second guess it. I try not to get to like, but that's not how I planned it in my head, therefore it's wrong. I kind of am like, well, it's all going to work out, right, for the good. And I just kind of have to have faith in that, because there are so many things that in my mind, if I allow myself to say what the best version of a thing is in my mind, then the expectations, that's the dangerous bit, right? It's the disappointment and the expectations, and that's so easily avoided.
Are you a planner? Are you a person that has to because I know you were just telling me that you have your podcast rig with you, so I know like you like to have control over the things you're working on. So yeah, you're the type of person that likes to plan. I have a 5-year plan, a 6-year plan, whatever, stuff like that.
Yeah. I
I
have weekend plans. I have day plans. I have so many lists that I reconcile. I try not to look at 6 years. I have like I want to be free from this thing in 5 or 6 years. I want to be pursuing this. I want to have this sort of relationship with my parents at this time, but kind of the specifics I try not to plan, because I also was going to go to med school. Like, I didn't plan to be sitting here on this stage in the shadow of me. Yeah. I was like in all of these accelerated classes and with an emphasis on like maths and sciences, and I was going to go to Baylor Medical, and ultimately I wanted to be a surgeon who worked in reconstructive surgery for people with medical diseases, like any sort of muscle atrophy or things like that. And I am an actor.
What was the point where you had to sort of, because you don't just one day decide you want to be a surgeon, that's with you for a while. You make decisions, you take classes, you commit to that. But at a certain point, this other career is kind of taking over, and you have to, in a way, let this first dream kind of go away. It's a hard thing to do. When did you make that decision?
Well, I think that I was concurrently dreaming. I think that I was, I was like, no one like pays their mortgage doing this. You know what I mean? So I was like, acting is a thing that is a luxury I will afford myself once I give myself a career that will sustain me. And never in my wildest dreams, I mean, there was so much hustle and there was so much like work, but I still never really kind of put both feet on it until I booked Sweet Life, my first TV show that moved me out when I was 14 to California and was working seriously. And I was still going through homeschool. I still had kind of a strong emphasis. And my parents were always like, if you ever don't like this or don't want to do this, we can move back to Texas. It's not a failure. Like, you did that thing, and that's awesome. And you can. And I think having that room and having that space was so incredible and encouraging. And I think there just became a point where, like, my friends started graduating college, where I was like, I don't think I'm gonna make it to school. Yeah.
There's so much I want to talk to you about, and I see our clock counting down, so I'm trying to squeeze everything in.
No.
Yeah, I know. We're going to keep going. Don't
talk
worry.
faster.
Yeah, we're going to keep going. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is, because I was listening to your podcast, and we'll get to that specifically in a second, but one of the things you and oh my God, the first episode. Kemi, thank you. You were talking to Kemi. And you guys are talking about all the outpouring that you guys get from fans that connect to the work that you guys are doing. And I feel like it's really easy. The conversation in the media's been dominated by the controversy of season 1. I don't see as much about this conversation, the good conversations that are happening because of this show that are taking place. If you go out and look yourself, you'll see them. They're there. Yeah. What was that like for you guys to be a part of those good conversations, to see that response, to have people come back and say, thank you for doing this, or I felt seen? Like, what was that like the first time you saw those coming in?
It was so special and redemptive because I think we all went into it first season bringing our history, right? Bringing the things that sit on our shoulders, bringing the things that have taken us to our dark places and saying, well, if there's anything I can get from this, I might as well put it into this and make sure that we make a cautionary tale for people so they don't believe the lie that if you fix the outsides, that the insides are good too. Like that sort of thing. Or like, oh, we've been programmed to believe in one sort of type of beauty, and if you achieve that, then you're nailing it. Like that programming we all realize is ridiculous and also so toxic. So, and then, of course, everyone has their own different versions. Patty particularly deals with disorder eating, but we have people on a journey of discovery in terms of sexuality, in terms of racial identity, in terms of finding themselves as a person with a disability and building their futures, and empty nest syndrome. And so it's so much about identity and people looking. We all brought that, and we were all like, wow, this is such a cool, safe place for us to, through satire and through broad comedy, start these conversations and acknowledge these themes, which are a reality of the world that we live in. Yeah. And so coming out of season 1, we felt this community in doing that. Having it be received in a way that was kind of not the way that we intended it and was not indicative of what we actually did was really confusing and devastating for a time. And then the show came out, and then we heard all of the feedback from people being like, I know what the show is. Now I watch the show. You know, it wasn't just 30 seconds of a trailer. It's like, now I know what the show is. And speaking to the actual show was so encouraging. And that's, I think, where a little bit of that spark came out and that life came back that was maybe a little defeated. And then going into season 2, we were like, based off of that feedback, well, how much more important is it then for us to further these in a really, really thoughtful and sensitive way? And so I think you'll understand and see, you know, our crew all the way across the board couldn't be a more broad spectrum of frames of references and just different types of backgrounds and different types of people. And I think everyone is mindful that we are not telling other people's stories, that everyone there is kind of speaking into something that they can speak to from a level of expertise. So in these conversations, which I'm stepping into on my podcast, thank you for listening, like it's been really fun because I just get to sit down with the cast and the crew who I know really well, and I know them based off of conversations we've had about our damage and what we want to see and our hopes. And there's, you know, fun is fun and funny is funny and delicious is delicious, but if we're not creating an outwardly lasting social change or a shift in the narrative that is productive and helpful, then there's no point to having the conversation. So I think the podcast has been such a great space for us to really step into and further these conversations in a way that's thoughtful and gives you more insight to these actors who, again, are all rock stars. But, we all have different things that we care about. And it was like I also am interviewing our eating disorder consultant and our writer who wrote an episode that deals with Dixie's kind of Korean American descent and that sort of storyline touching on that. She is of Korean American descent, so she can speak to that. I'm not going to do that, so I can just ask her, like, tell me. And that way I can really kind of create this space for people to tell me things and I can learn and we can share and then we can point people to resources. And so as Patty is navigating her journey with disordered eating, there are so many people who have been saying, like, I've never seen binge eating on TV like that. I've never seen, it is such a shameful thing. And my relationship with my disordered eating and my dysmorphia has been really healed just by interacting with someone or meeting someone or hearing someone or seeing someone say, like, this is my story. Yeah. Like, you too? Like, that's a thing that I had to hide before I went in public. And now I'm able to go into public and find something that points me towards the hope of freedom from it. And I just think everyone deserves freedom, and hope is so available, and help is everywhere around us, and bridging that gap is so key.
How much of your time on this show, on Insatiable, on Being Patty, how much of that work opened doors for you internally to enable you to have these kinds of conversations that you're having on the podcast, being around these people? Because they sound like conversations you've had for a long time, but obviously they're influenced by the experience you've had on this show.
Definitely. Yeah, and my kind of trick was always to like do enough in public to where people didn't realize like what I wasn't telling them. Yeah. Do you know? To just talk about my projects and like the coffee that I had and like this album that I like, and then no one knew that I was dealing with disordered eating or my mom was in chemo or whatever. Like all of these were my personal, right. And my kind of currency was to give things that didn't touch my soul. So I certainly never expected to go into something in a way that really like cracked into those places. And what you realize is actually when you break into them and you kind of show your like guts a little bit, that lets the light in, and that lets some of that tension out and that shame and that fear. And those are really, really dangerous things, shame and fear. And when you allow them to govern you, they will just hold you prisoner. And they'll lie to you. Like they'll tell you they're helping you, but they're lying. And to let the light in, it actually makes them kind of cower and takes their power away from them. And so in thinking that I was just trying to do Patty justice by knowing my firsthand experience and applying that to the authenticity and genuine nature of this girl, I actually ended up finding a lot of kind of healing and hope and courage. And it's funny because the show was so broad and wild and neon. Right. So then I think it's actually so important for us to all be very connected and grounded to these moments. And it can break your heart because it's at the end of the day, she has a good heart, and she, like all of these people do, they're just making inadvisable choices.
Yeah. That's a way to phrase it. They're inadvisable choices, yeah.
Kindly. I have to be kind.
We're going to take some questions from the audience, but to pull a page from your podcast, I'm grateful for this conversation and for your honesty. And thank you so much for just like being open and talking with me here today, especially in this room of friends and fans here. We're going to take some from the world. The first one's going to come to us from Twitter. This is at DVY Drevming. Says, hey, Debbie, in this season of Insatiable, Patty realizes she's a killer. How did you prepare to get into the mindset of a criminal? Did you do research on different serial killers or anything? ?
Great question, Lauren. I am so... it makes me sound weird, but before she first goes into her first rage episode, her rage blackout with Christian, I was like looking at photos of crime scenes and reading interviews with lady killers. I think there is a difference in how women deal with rage and anger and how a woman would maybe approach killing someone, especially someone who is typically as impulsive and compulsive as Patty. So I was looking for that and crimes of passion, and I found a lot of things that were really disturbing and images I can't get out of my mind. And the horror of kind of coming to and realizing what you've done is definitely needs to be informed by the horror of having seen something that you can't unsee, and because it does point into like, oh, we can't undo this. Like, I just have to now move forward from here. And when you do something like that, it makes you then a liar. You have to hide, you have to cover up. And so I also studied that. I studied the psychology of it. I, rewatched Dexter. I kind of did a lot of different versions of it. But yeah, the season 2 of it all, these were all interesting because she doesn't have a method. And typically with a serial killer, there is one particular method, and each one of these was kind of circumstantial and how she could use what happened in the moment. And so as we move through season 2, each one of those I kind of treated individually. And particularly Gordy, I was listening to Happy Face Killer podcast, which is from the Happy Face Killer's daughter. It's produced by her, and it's interviews with her growing up while her father was doing this. And he was a serial killer, especially of young women. So that was dark and harrowed me out and got you in the mind space of being like, oh, someone can go and play with their little girl and also then go and do this despicable thing. And to know that there's that duality, I think you just kind of have to lean into it. And then you have to like choose to wipe your hands of it and put your phone down and kind of clear your head and energetically get it out of your system. Because I know there is a world in which it lingers inside of you. And I was always very careful not to let her stay. But the biggest thing for me was just the importance, right? It's like, this is important that this happens because Gordy did a very, very bad thing. And Gordy not only did a bad thing to the person that I kind of care the most about and couldn't have done a worse thing. I really think all sins are created equal. I think that the thing that Gordy did is the worst thing that a person can do. And that was not hard to want that person to be done talking, and so then it's just kind of as is everything in the show, just taking that and cranking it up.
Turn it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And is all that process and all that preparation happening while you're doing the capoeira training as well? Is that all simultaneous?
Yes.
Because you were telling me during the clip that that's actually you in the show doing those moves and stuff like that, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, we trained a lot. I trained a lot with a stunt double, and she was certainly on set for a lot of it, and they shot her doing a lot of it. There was one particular move that they wouldn't let me do.
Interesting.
And they cut around, and it was only because, and I begged them, and they were like, no. And they were like, all right, for the rest of the things that I've done, this one was the one that I couldn't do. And it was just during this capoeira fight sequence, which is like pretty epic, she goes gets thrown through the stove hood and over on the other side, and they wouldn't let me do it. So I just got pushed accidentally into the stove, and then they were like, cut. And then they're like, okay, we'll take it from right after and I roll all the way back into the stove, and I fully overlap the thing, and they ended up being able to cut it and use it. So it was perfect, and Casey is amazing and has saved my butt so many times, my stunt double, but the training was so much fun. Because on set, they're very precious with actors. They're like, don't hurt her. Let me get you a water. And so I'm scrappy, and I'm like, how are you supposed to buy that I do that if I don't do that?
Right.
So I kind of convinced, they brought in this Brazilian man to teach me, and he didn't know to be precious with me. So we were just kicking each other and punching each other for like a month. And
Where was it within like how much show did you have to do after that sequence? Because that's what they're thinking of. It's like if she gets hurt now, we're done.
Yeah. Oh, I think I had like 2 more months.
Oh my God.
I think I had 2 more months. But I shot a movie one time with my knee broken, like truly on a broken knee. So every time you see my character, I'm either driving or leaning against a door frame because I was delaying surgery. It was every day.
Every day.
Which I came here, I think it was every day. Yes, I shot it in Toronto. I broke my knee, and then I went to urgent care, discovered that my kneecap was broken in half. Flew to California, went from the airport, saw a surgeon. He was like, whatever you do, you got to get a surgery immediately. I was like, awesome, BRB. And then the next morning, I unpacked, repacked, flew to Toronto, shot for a week and a half, just leaning against a door frame, and just had my brace on as much as possible, and then flew back and immediately went straight into surgery.
And all the while you're like, I should have been a surgeon.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't have broken my knee if I was a surgeon. Would have been able to do it myself.
We've got a couple of questions in the room. We'll take them right now. First one, you got a microphone. Come on down. Hey.
Hi.
Hey.
I was wondering what was the funniest moment you had on set?
Oh, that's a great question. It's hard because it's not only watching these funny people be funny, but also watching people be very serious in hilarious situations. Reading the Wiener Taco menu is like quite funny because it's also very nuanced and funny. And anytime that's present, there's a scene where here's a spoiler for anyone who hasn't watched. Yeah, earmuffs, everyone. I'm stuffing a body into a suitcase, and I have to do that, and trying, and they just put the camera on, locked off. And as I'm doing that, Dr. Sanjay Gupta was in the room watching me do that, and they're just like, scream, like cuss, yell at her and flip her off or whatever. And I'm really just taking licenses, and then went back and saw like Dr. Sanjay Gupta, so distinguished, like watching me just be an idiot. Thank you.
Amazing. Do we have time? I got to do one more. Let's do one more question. You got a microphone?
Yep.
Hey.
I got a question from our site. Patty is such a complicated character who has like really real aspects about herself and really difficult things that she deals with, and she has a lot of larger than life qualities as well that like are magical and crazy. How do you reconcile that when preparing for a character like this?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I've never met a person who was one thing. So I think understanding that everyone is a bunch of contradictions and just seeing which thing takes the reins in each kind of moment, and finding its roots in me, right, and being like, what of me is here and could motivate me to do this. And she's very determined to do the right thing because deep down she isn't sure she's a good person. And she isn't sure she's a good person because she wants recovery but doesn't believe she deserves recovery, so she's sabotaging her own recovery. So she's truly contradicting herself every step of the way. But I think it's just the easiest to look at someone's like base need and want, and I think she just wants to be loved and seen and feel that she is enough. And I don't think she's ever had that in her like upbringing and growing up with Angie, who is trying, but and her peers as well. And so in every kind of different context, knowing that at the very core, that if she doesn't feel heard or if she doesn't feel wanted or loved, that can trigger that kind of rage. And once you spark it, it's all the way up. She just has this flame in her, and it jumps burners. So we see it in binge eating, and then her disordered eating takes different forms, and then towards the end, we see her discover a different way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure do.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. We got to wrap things up. You got a million things to do, but thank you so much for making us one of those things today. It was really awesome to have you back here. I want to remind the world that Insatiable is streaming right now on Netflix. There You Are, the podcast, is available where podcasts are available. It's on iTunes all over the place. How often are you doing releases? Once a week? What do you think?
Yeah, we're doing 2 or 3 a week
2 or 3
now.
a week.
So
Okay.
we have another one coming out in a second, and then next week we got 3 coming at you, and they're really good ones too. So.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again for being here and hanging out with us.
Grateful that
Guys,
you had me, man.
Oh, anytime. The door's always open. You know that. Guys, make a crazy amount of noise. That's Debby Ryan right there. Come on.